All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee for Tuesday, January 28th. We are starting our afternoon with a State of Agriculture briefing, but before we do that, we need to honor one of our own. It is our friend Jay Jacobs' birthday. Happy birthday, delegate. So with that, first of all, let me just warn the members of the committee, some of the subcommittees are going to start meeting substantively this week beyond the organizational meetings. We might have a brief voting session on Friday. Friday we have floor, it's not pro forma, so you're going to be here anyway, so we might do a short voting session just to exercise our committee voting muscles. And with that, we can turn to our State of Ag briefing. We have Mary Lou Brown from the Delmarva Chicken Association, Tyler from the Horizon Farm Credit, John Swain from the Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts, Carl Schlegel from the Maryland Farm Bureau, and Justin Brendel from the Maryland Grain Producers Association. And you all can go in whatever order you see fit and sort of rotate chairs as you need to, and we'll do questions after all the panelists' colleagues. So please go ahead.
I guess I'll start since he's starting with me. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Lou Brown, and I am the current president of the Delmarva Chicken Association. I am an owner of Maple Breeze Farm, which I operate with my son and daughter. We have 6 commercial chicken houses growing over 600,000 broilers a year. I am also active on the Dorchester County Farm Bureau Board, a 4-H volunteer leader, and serve on the Caroline-Dorchester County Fair Board. The chicken community is made up of more than 1,200 independent family farmers. They are raising chickens in 4,900 chicken houses across Delaware, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and Virginia. There are 5 chicken companies, 18,000 employees of those chicken companies, and hundreds of allied businesses that are tied to the industry. In 2024, we raised 613 million birds, which equated to 4.6 billion pounds of chicken. Our chickens is valued at more than $4.8 billion. In Maryland, there are nearly 550 growers and a $5.5 billion total economic impact. The industry alone contributed more than $255 million in local and state taxes. It is no surprise to you what the greatest concern is right now for all the chicken farmers on Delmarva Peninsula, and that is the avian influenza, high-path avian influenza. You heard last week from the Maryland Department of Agriculture and others. It's scary. Me personally, I'm scared to death what I will see when I walk into that chicken house, those chicken houses every day. We are doing everything that we can to protect myself and my flock. Some of the biosecurity things that my family does to protect ourselves is we minimize the number of people coming onto the farm. Secondly, we have sheds with manure in it, and the person moving the manure out of there will not be doing it during the flock and will not be doing it if it's not allowed, obviously. And then we also, when we go into that chicken house, we go through a LOS, line of safety, or we go through that, which is we step into the chicken house, we have an area corded off, and we have one bleach there. We have already put on dedicated farm boots that we put on that are at the farm. When we walk into the chicken house, we step in bleach. Then, before we go where the chickens are, we put on a pair of boots over top of what we have on, or change boots. Do not step in that area, but step over the fence into another bleach pan. And then we hope and pray that we're able to control the avian influenza from coming into our farm. And I know from just knowing from the last break that everybody doing everything they can, it doesn't always work. It just doesn't work when there's crap all over the driveways and such. And that's what carries it in, and there's not much you can do about it. So it's very nerve-wracking for all of us, and it won't lighten up until they're done migrating. So that's what we are dealing with on the Eastern Shore of Maryland right now. But we are a strong community, and we know we can get through it together with our partners, the legislators, and the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Finally, we invite you to Chicken Day next week in Annapolis, the 4th, at the Historic Inns in Annapolis. This is just one of the events going on next week for Maryland Ag Week. Visit with other growers and folks in the chicken community. Eat lots of chicken and take a virtual reality tour of a chicken house. I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much for your time.
You all continue in whichever order you would like.
I can go. That way I'll start down here. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to speak to you all today. My name is Tyler Marchek, Government Affairs Manager for Horizon Farm Credit, and I'm here to provide some additional insight into what our customers experienced in 2024 and what we might find in the coming year. But first, a bit of background regarding who we are. Horizon Farm Credit is a part of the Farm Credit System, a nationwide network of financial cooperatives established in 1916 to support rural communities and agriculture by providing reliable, consistent credit and financial services in good times and bad. As a locally owned and operated cooperative lender, we serve a 5-state region that includes Pennsylvania, Delaware, Central Maryland, 5 northern counties of Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and both panhandles of West Virginia. With over $7 billion in outstanding loans and over 22,000 members across our 100-county footprint, we are one of the largest agricultural lenders on the East Coast. To be clear, we serve all shapes, sizes, and iterations of agriculture here in Maryland. And whether it's conventional, free-range, organic, all-natural, biodynamic, or some other method yet to be developed, we support that too. Our major commodities in Maryland and throughout our footprint include cash grains, poultry, broiler chickens in particular, dairy, and nursery landscaping. I want to touch briefly on a few. Poultry was slightly back on track in 2024, with turnover times returning to pre-COVID levels and pay increases to help combat inflation that drove producers' expenses to higher than expected levels. However, the start of 2025 has not been ideal, with several HPAI outbreaks on the Eastern Shore and neighboring states. These outbreaks have directly affected the producers and those who fall within the control zones. As I stated earlier, it is our mission to work with our members through good times and bad, and this is no exception. In 2024 was a challenging year for grain farms in Maryland. Mother Nature was not kind to producers as weather events caused lower yields across corn, soybeans, and wheat. Commodity prices continued a downward trend throughout the year, causing many farmers to have lower than expected revenue from impacted yields and low prices. Overall, in 2024, if you broke even as a grain farmer, you had a good year, but many of our farmers did not manage to break even. We have heard from customers that they are concerned about how they'll cover all of their expenses from 2024. It's not a shock to this committee, but deer damage remains a massive problem for all grain farmers. Though we know it's been occurring for years, our loan officers are still hearing from farmers dropping farms directly due to deer damage. A combination of more and better data due to the widespread adoption of precision agriculture is bringing to the forefront what has long been a problem. Our dairy customers in Maryland generally had an average year in 2024. Most didn't lose ground from a balance sheet perspective, but they likely didn't gain ground either. Regardless of whether a significant portion of the industry does well, we cannot forget that these operations are family-owned, small businesses, each with a unique operating model and facing their own specific and varied challenges. That is why we continue to offer our member assistance program to our customers. Member assistance program is a free 24/7 access to clinicians open to all customers for their families and is 100% anonymous. It provides counseling, legal and financial assistance, identity theft recovery, just to highlight a key several areas. We hope they never need it, but it's here if they do. Despite high interest rates, stubborn input costs, and softening commodity markets, we remain bullish on the long-term prospects for Maryland agriculture. We have access to a significant consumer base nearby in DC, Baltimore, Wilmington, Philadelphia, and New York. Our farmers are second to none in resource management and conservation innovation. There's excitement and drive in the next generation, and we have a dynamic mix of livestock crops, production methods, and marketing approaches within the state. Farm Credit is excited about the future of ag in Maryland. We are committed to being there for our members and the next generation, helping them achieve the best possible outcomes for their farms and their families. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice, and members of the committee, good afternoon and happy Tuesday to you all. My name is Carl Schlegel, and I'm a fourth-generation farmer from Waldorf. My family has a very diversified operation, but our primary crops are fruit and vegetables. We grow everything from A to Z, asparagus to zucchini. We sell these wholesale, retail, pick your own. We host educational field trips, and we do a lot of work with the food insecure. I currently serve on Maryland Farm Bureau's Board of Directors, representing all 5 Southern Maryland counties, and am Farm Bureau's representative to the Food System Resiliency Council. Farming in Maryland is not all sunshine and rainbows. We face many challenges that are unique to our industry, the majority of which we have played no direct role in creating, such as the significant losses due to an exploding deer population. The life of farming and living with the land will always be marked by weather events. Too much rain, not enough, it's too cold, or it's too hot. Good news, I'm not asking you to legislate the weather. However, I would like to talk to you about something that every year we continue to have more and more concern with. Farmland faces increasing pressure from renewable energy projects, transmission lines, urban sprawl, and development. Farmland is a finite resource, and every acre lost is an acre of food not available for Maryland citizens. Protecting farmland is food security. Protecting farmland is protecting Maryland's #1 commercial industry. Maryland Farm Bureau acknowledges the importance of meeting the state's renewable energy goal of 50% by 2031. However, we urge you to make sure that our farms don't suffer a disproportionate role. We strongly oppose the placement of solar on prime agricultural soils. We advocate the use of publicly owned lands, brownfields, rooftops, and parking lots. Frankly, I don't think a single acre of Maryland farmland should be utilized until every rooftop in the state has solar installed. Please don't let these goals decimate local food systems. One of the best ways to protect Maryland farmland is to help it make it more profitable. Maryland agriculture is a testament to resilience and innovation. We are a diverse state, and our farms are just as diverse. Many farmers have embraced value-added agriculture, taking the raw ingredients they produce and transforming them. Think wine grapes, on-farm breweries, milk into ice cream and cheese, or berries into jams and jellies. This is just the beginning, though. This is just the low-hanging fruit. There is such potential to do more and reach more consumers. There's such potential to grow farms and businesses, to bolster local economies and create on-farm tourism. Despite this ingenuity, many farmers hit roadblocks while navigating the burdensome regulations. Current regulatory framework is rigid. The lack of flexibility limits innovation. Scalability in code and regulation continues to prove daunting for small business and agriculture. Many farms look to value add as an opportunity to grow their business and or create a path for the younger generation to come home. Our hope is that you will continue to look favorably upon laws and regulations that would ease the burdens and create a path to profitability. Food insecurity is a real concern in our state. It's not just a City of Baltimore issue or a Prince George's County issue. It's an everywhere issue. Hunger doesn't discriminate or care where you live. Unfortunately, it does affect our most vulnerable citizens. There is no cookie-cutter approach to fixing this. It's a big task, and it's going to take a lot of moving parts to make a dent. My family and our farm has done a lot of work in this space, and we've learned a lot, and we continue to learn how to best serve our community. You have to meet them where they are. You hear a lot about access, but it's not just about having access in a food desert. It's also about the funds and the ability to get the food home. Culturally appropriate foods are important. There are some fruits and veggies that we all eat, but there are some that don't cross over cultural lines. Giving someone a vegetable they weren't raised with or don't know how to cook is no different than giving them nothing. The first step to fighting food insecurity is to make sure there is food. To make food, we have to grow it. To grow it, we need farms. So please, help us protect our farms so that we can continue to grow food and support our communities. A Maryland with farms is a Maryland that is fed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chairman Boyce, members of the committee. I would like to thank you for inviting me to present at this event. My name is John Swain. I'm a grain farmer from Talbot County and the president of the Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts. MESCD represents Maryland's 23 conservation districts, which were established to support voluntary, locally led conservation for farmers and communities that lie in every county across the state. We serve as the boots on the ground to work with farmers to identify the best management practices that are the right fit for their farm to reduce nutrient runoff, decrease erosion, improve water quality, and increase soil health and contribute to Maryland's climate goals. We also work with other individuals, businesses, and communities to ensure that they have support to reduce their impacts on Chesapeake Bay and local watersheds. The program staffing and priorities look a little different in each district depending on land use, whether the district is more urban or rural, and the roles and responsibilities of the partners in that county. Our mission has evolved over time. 75 years ago, in the wake of the Dust Bowl, our main focus was to reduce erosion. For more than 40 years, but especially since 2010, we have been a key partner in the Chesapeake Bay restoration effort. Now, as we look beyond 2025 for the Bay and the future for climate change, the districts will continue to help farmers implement conservation practices that are rooted in sound science and local priorities. Thanks to funding through the state, Maryland is #1 in the country for percentage of our cropland planted in cover crops. In 2024, with assistance from the districts, farmers planted about 450,000 acres. Technical staff at the districts assisted nearly 1,000 farmers to implement more than 3,400 BMPs, best management practices. They wrote or updated more than 1,300 soil conservation and water quality plans, protecting more than 130,000 acres. Working in our urban communities, districts reviewed 10,000 erosion and sediment control plans to ensure that economic development is compatible with environmental protection. Maryland's conservation districts also work with farmers to use federal funds for conservation. The state's investment in technical staff at the districts has been critical in leveraging Inflation Reduction Act funds through Farm Bill programs. In 2024, conservation districts helped to get a total of $71.4 million in state and federal funds on the ground to implement conservation projects. This funding is especially critical in difficult economic times, such as the agriculture communities experienced in recent years. Farmers across the nation have experienced a decline in income for the past 2 years, made worse here in Maryland by extremely poor weather and low crop yields in many parts of the state. Every farmer at this table is committed to helping their farms, keep their farms sustainable for their livelihood as well as the future generations. Maryland farmers are experiencing economic conditions in which it can be challenging for farmers to prioritize conservation, and the investment from the state through cover crop program, agriculture cost share assistance, land preservation program, and others have helped to ensure that we stay on track in protecting our natural resources for the long term. In closing, I would like to thank members of the Maryland General Assembly for the time to speak with you today and for your support for soil conservation programs to ensure that our farmers have had the tools and technical assistance available that they need. Thank you very much.
Great. Can we rotate out so Justin from the grain producers has a slot?
So we got one more to speak.
Yep. Can one of you just stand up so he can present? And while he's settling in, I just want to acknowledge that Secretary Addix from the Department of Agriculture is here to listen.
Good afternoon. Before I begin real quick, I'm going to take a poll real quick. Can I see a show of hands from the committee of who had breakfast or lunch today? Get them up. Everybody did, right? We have a unique relationship. We grow your food and you consume it. Okay? So not that anybody doesn't know that, but I just like to say that up front. So just remember us when you're getting to issues that deal with ag and we're talking about those. We'd love for you to reach out. Chairman Corman and distinguished members of the committee, first I'd like to thank you for holding this briefing and allowing me to speak on behalf of Maryland's grain farmers. My name is Justin Brendel. I'm the president of the Maryland Grain Producers Association. We represent farmers who grow corn, wheat, barley, sorghum, and milo in our state. My family in particular farms in Howard and Montgomery counties. We grow about 1,000 acres of corn, wheat, and soybeans, and in addition to that, some beef cattle. I want to start my comments today by thanking all the farmers who feed us every day. Farmers are the smallest minority that impacts every American multiple times a day, from the food they eat, to the fuel they use, to the clothes they wear. Grain farming is integral to Maryland's ag economy. Over 1.2 million acres of corn and soybeans are grown each year. Depending on the grain market, Maryland farmers contribute over $500 million, with a B, dollars to Maryland's economy every year. Nearly all the corn and soybeans produced in Maryland are bought and milled locally to feed chickens on the Delmarva Peninsula and other livestock throughout the state. The poultry litter produced by the chickens in particular is used as a slow-release organic fertilizer that many producers use to meet the needs of their grain crops, creating almost like a little recycling program. We've done this forever. It will not come as a surprise to anyone when I say that lingering inflation, supply chain, transportation issues, among others, have made for a challenging last few years for farmers. You heard about some of our weather concerns from the farm credit folks. The tragic loss of the Key Bridge and the Baltimore port closure have caused a disruption, had caused a disruption for us in the nitrogen availability and other fertilizers at a very crucial time last spring. The Port of Baltimore is also a major hub for us for importing agricultural equipment and goods that are also distributed throughout the country. We are grateful to the Moore administration for their work in getting the port back open and getting construction of the new bridge planned and hopefully underway. The cost of nutrients, pesticides, seeds, fuel, equipment, and labor all increased exponentially in 2020. We can remember that happened with a lot of things. They have not yet come back down for our producers to pre-pandemic levels. Farmers are the only businesses, or we are the only business that buy retail and sell wholesale. I want you to let that sink in for a second. These factors coupled with low commodity prices led to the lowest farm gate net income since the agricultural depression in the 1980s. I was young when that happened, but I remember what effect that had on my family. Maryland's grain producers and our sister organization, our utilization board, which does not lobby, is funded by a grain checkoff program where a percentage of grain sold in the state goes to fund projects that further our grain industry and help promote it. In 2024, we invested almost over $1.3 million farmer dollars to fund education, market development, and research. The farmer-led board, which I'm a part of, funded several research projects investigating the efficacy of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, along with nutrient application strategies. As farmers, we cannot afford to apply anything in excess. We have very, very tight margins. And this is why this funding is beneficial to us to continue to help us to do our job better every day. Even so, farmers continue to see a value in conservation practices. A record number of cover crop acres was planted this past fall in 2024. This would not be financially feasible for many of us without the cover crop program, which you all have been supportive of. Did you know that 1 acre of corn can sequester 8 tons of carbon in one growing season? And while there is no silver bullet to solving the water and quality and climate issues that our state faces, our Maryland farmers are committed to have continually stepped up to the plate to do our part. To do this, we need to access tools such as herbicides and genetically modified seeds to make many of these conservation practices possible. And we ask that any decisions made on these issues be made on sound science and agency experience. As grain farmers, we will continue to deal, with wildlife and deer damage, bears, geese, damage from all kinds of things. Farmers, particularly in Dorchester, Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset counties, are experiencing extreme deer pressure, which is saying a lot in our state. Every county in our state deals with extreme pressure from wildlife. But they are experiencing an extra amount of damage due to Sika deer, which are non-native. It's an invasive species of elk that was brought here, but however, they are protected as a game animal in Maryland. Thanks to this committee for passing legislation that allowed our farmers to hold a doe harvest challenge, which this year, a couple weekends ago, was responsible for the harvest of 550 antlerless deer. That's a lot. And out of those 550 deer, that equated to 4,500 pounds of venison being donated to the Maryland Food Bank, which I'm sure was welcome. Maryland farmers are still recognized across the country as some of the best stewards of the land. Besides our families, our farms are our greatest source of pride, and we are committed to protecting natural resources for our next generation. And as you can see, We are always willing to solve problems, and we are not scared to put our own resources to use to help this along. With your leadership and cooperation, Maryland's agriculture future is bright because of the dedication and passion of our farmers. We are stewards, providers, entrepreneurs, families, scientists, and innovators. Maryland's farmers will continue to adapt to remain viable while minimizing the economic or the environmental impacts of our work. And I thank you for your time. Real quick, those are my prepared remarks. I can tell you that on a national scale, the farmers in this state are an absolute leader in environmental stewardship. My family also farms in central Illinois. If you're not familiar with the Midwest or the Corn Belt, grain is grown there in a more conventional way. We work a lot of ground there. And I can tell you firsthand that the benefits of the cover crop program here and other environmental practices that we use in this state, they should be adopted there. They're slow to adopt, but your farmers here are doing good work to adopt them ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And as colleagues are pressing their buttons with any questions, I want to acknowledge that two of those farmers serve on this committee, Delegate Ziegler, Delegate Otto. So thank you both. Any questions for the panel? Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look at, I ask of you, what can we do to support additional markets and profitability for, I think you touched on a lot of it. And how is there ample seasonal workers or employees that you can do? I know the tractors sit up for 6 months out of the year and are busy the other 3 on each side of the season. And how about energy costs? Is that an important factor that you're dealing with? So I'm open to whomever wants to answer those questions.
I'll field a little bit to start out with, at least from the grain standpoint. I mentioned earlier that we exist on very thin margins. Our margins were largely negative this past year. I just went through some budget numbers and post-harvest numbers, and we should profit. I'm just going to throw rough numbers out. We should be able to garner about $100 out of an acre or more in a very good year. We were minus 200 on our corn crop this year, minus $200 an acre. I have friends and neighbors that, one in particular, that is going to borrow money to pay back borrowed money from the previous year. So if you could imagine that with a mortgage on a house or something like that, having to remortgage it. So it's very difficult. But the answer, part of the answer to the question is reach out to us, ask us. There are people in our ranks that can answer the trade questions a little bit better than maybe I can. But every little bit of cost for us is a big cost to us, to our bottom line.
Delegate Otto, I'll speak briefly to that. I was going to say to your question, all the above, frankly, across every sector within the ag industry. I would say a lot of it, what we've seen is increased direct-to-consumer markets for a lot of our producers. I think we've seen a rise of that quite considerably, of other ways that they can tap in revenue. I think additionally, agritourism is a huge piece of that. As we have continuing growing population here in the state of Maryland and around our farms, I think it's important that those farms also become a teaching opportunity for those communities who live there and understand what happens on the farm, the noises, the smells, the food, and the production that comes between all of that. So I think just to answer a couple of those things, definitely in those two pieces.
I would like to address, and I can only do a little bit of this from what I've heard through people because I don't use personally migratory workers, but they are very related to the poultry industry. And we need people like the migratory workers to work in the plants. They're willing to work in it, and we need them there, and we need them catching our chickens on a regular basis. So if that gets to be a problem, then we don't have somebody to do the work for us in those areas. So migratory workers are very important to us. I can't speak to other areas of agriculture on that at all.
Delegate, labor is a constant concern. 25 years ago, when we were starting to expand our fruit and vegetable business, post-tobacco buyout, we realized really quick and in a hurry, there is not a legal domestic workforce here in the state. we began availing ourselves of the H-2A program. It's a federal program to bring in foreign guest workers. They come in for 9 months at a time. They help us do our harvest, our planting, our picking, our packing, and then they go home. We continue to avail of ourselves of that program. As I talk to more and more farmers from across the state, more and more people that had the opportunity to get somebody from town or there were people available to help, they are having to rely on this program. It is becoming a necessity in the state of Maryland, as it is across the country. 5 years ago, I think the state of Maryland had 500 to 600 H-2A workers. At that time, the H-2B workers were more, the guys and gals they use in the crab houses for picking crabs. When I was talking to my inspector last week, who was out inspecting our housing unit, he said that we should be on track to about 1,500 H-2A workers in the state of Maryland, which is a significant increase over the past 5 or 6 years at this point. So yes, it's a concern.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brendel, I think you were the one who was saying that you can make as much as $100 per acre, but that last year it was negative 200. And do you have a sense of how much of that loss is due to deer damage? Can you quantify that at all?
Sure, I can quantify that. So let me clarify a little bit. $100 is kind of an average over a couple of years that I'd like to see, that I consider to be a number that I can kind of continue with. Let's put it that way, right? So that's kind of a minimum for us. Deer damage, I can quantify that pretty easily. They account for about 20% of a loss. Now that's part of that 100. I can do better than that. But through GPS mapping, we map everything. When we plant, when we spray, when we harvest, you're aware of this. We map everything, and we can tell from those maps that on an average year, not this past year, but on an average year, we lose between 15 and 20% of our crops just to deer, period. This past year, however, the weather was the dominating factor in that. Dry weather was the dominating factor.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask a different question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to go to, I guess, Mr. Schlegel, talking about the solar arrays on farmland. Completely understand about prime farmland, and, you know, certainly we don't want to lose farmland. And I'm not a farmer, but do I understand that there is different levels of soil? So when you say prime farmland, is that all farmland, or do farmers have some land which is not prime?
So our specific policy and our designation are class 1 and 2 soils, which are going to be your most productive farmland, which we would prefer not to have solar implemented on it.
So, and you also spoke about, you know, the thin margins for farming. And is it possible that solar can be an income stream to help support some of those farms when it's on that lower quality land that farmers might have?
There is the potential for that. You are starting to see more and more farmers take advantage of smaller scale projects on the farm to help mitigate their electrical costs. The biggest concern, and speaking as I'm not really a young farmer anymore, but I'm not an old farmer. I'm in that weird in-between period. It happens. Man, I look in the mirror and I'm not happy what I see sometimes. The concern is this. You put any field into solar, and it's supposed to be 30 years. 30 years ago, I didn't know I was going to be sitting here. And 30 years from now, I don't know what that's going to be. And when you see some of the solar projects that have gone in on neighbors' farms or adjoining properties, and you see the amount of topsoil that is moved, I'll be honest, I have trouble believing that that field is ever going to go back into agricultural production. You know, you move topsoil, you play terrible times getting it back to where it needs to. That's why soil conservation is so important, to keep our topsoil in the fields where they are, and it doesn't end up in streams and the rivers and ultimately the bay. I think sometimes some of these solar contractors and some of the people that are speaking so highly of it, I don't think they're being completely honest, because they don't know what 30 years looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Delegate Naraki.
Chair. I'm going to follow my colleague about deer for a second. So I'm actually working with Baltimore County right now and the Department of Ag. We're trying to stand up a more formalized plan in Baltimore County for deer management. So it's kind of led me down all kinds of pathways looking into deer and economic damages and things like that. But I'm curious, since each of you are kind of from different parts of the state, your experience with kind of the deer management plans in your area, is there anything that we should be doing? I think DNR and Department of Ag are doing a lot, but is there anything that we should be doing from a state perspective to do better with respect to deer management?
I can start on that. The answer is make it easier. We can get crop damage permits. We still have to report. There's still some burden on us to do that. In my opinion, when I have crops in the field and they're growing and there are deer eating them, I should be able to harvest them at will. We were at a group of at a meeting, a group of local legislators a couple years ago. One of those local legislators said to me, well, why don't we just make it so that you can harvest the deer when they're in the field, but if they're undercover, that you couldn't harvest them? And I thought, well, that was pretty common sense. Why don't we do that? But something like that has never been done. But it's the deer, I cannot overstate the amount of damage that the deer do to us. The gentleman from Farm Credit mentioned before that people have given up farms due to deer damage. We've given up farms due to deer damage. And I don't have another way to do that. Not only can we not probably, even though that would make it better to be able to harvest at will, it still probably won't solve the problem. It's going to take a couple of different solutions to make that possible. One of those is deer fence, which if you're not aware is 8-foot tall fence. A lot of the fruit and vegetable producers have adopted that program and are able to utilize that. But in my world, as a beef producer and a grain producer, it would allow, if I could fence my farms and have some, have that ability, I could graze those farms in addition to growing crops. Now we're talking about a little bit more resiliency in our food supply. And I'd like to see something like that in addition to just harvesting alone.
Anyone else? Anyone else have any thoughts?
I'm sorry.
You got it.
I don't know whether I have it. I'm from Dorchester County, and my friends that are farmers in lower Dorchester County, they have terrible deer damage down there, and they would like it easier to harvest. They have their permitting, and it's just, they feel burdensome when they go to do it, just like he was saying. So, but they would like it to be easier to harvest. And we deal with sick of deer big time down there. And on my farm alone, which is a 30 acres where 55 acres, 30 acres where my chicken houses are, right behind the chicken houses, I can see 20 deer grazing back there between a landfill and my chicken houses when I pull in there at night. That's unbelievable. I tell people, come, sit in a chair, and you can shoot deer.
Yeah.
So years ago, my dad had a figure, and he figured when you're driving down the road and you see deer, you count, everybody like, oh, look at the deer, and they count the deer. And figure that every deer that you count, multiply that times $1,000, and that's what's taken out of that farmer's pocketbook. Now, that isn't adjusted for inflation, obviously, but those are the kind of losses that we see and that we figure and that we assume that we're losing. Yes, we need to make it easier. We need to make crop damage permits easier to get a hold of. We need to make them larger in scale. Our farm, fruit and vegetable operation, we've been under continuous crop damage permits since '89, maybe, give or take. We take part in the legislation that allows us to do nighttime hunting activities during the winter months. Past 5 years, we've had approximately 1,000 pounds per year of venison that we have donated to the Maryland Food Bank or to local food charities that exist in our own county. So we need to make it easier. I would tell you this year there is legislation coming out of Prince George's County. They want to add Sunday hunting to Prince George's County, bow hunting only, to try to help mitigate the problem. I think that could be beneficial. The doe harvest challenge that we have seen such popularity and has made such a dent down on the lower shore, I think we should really consider expanding that. I know there's demand for it. I know there's people that want it. Anne Arundel County desperately wants it. But DNR pushes back. They push back hard on that. You know, the deer are owned by the people of Maryland. But we're citizens too. You know, we farm too. So we have to look at it from a standpoint of they are they're a roadblock to profitability on farms.
Thank you.
Last question, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here and talking with us. I want to go back to the discussion and the question about profitability. I'm going to use a quote from a farmer that won't be named, but it feels like sometimes with crops, it's always kind of the race to the bottom as it relates to profitability. And so I'm curious about, of your yields, how much of that goes out of state versus in state when you sell?
On our farm, it's kind of hard to tell because we go where the prices are best. So we have, in the mid-Maryland, we have the benefit of having a positive basis on corn, for instance, but we have a negative basis on beans. So our bean crop largely is, at least on our side of the bridge, is exported, goes to the export market. Our corn crop will stay, about 60% will stay in Maryland, and the balance will go to the state of Virginia, to the Shenandoah Valley, which is a popular market. And we go there because they have some poultry industry as well, and they're able to provide that extra basis on the crop. We try to sell locally when we can here, but grain is a commodity, and it kind of follows the path of least resistance.
Sure.
Yeah, John Swain again. On the Eastern Shore, a lot of the grain stays on the Eastern Shore, Delmarva, but doesn't necessarily stay in Maryland because of where the feed mills are. You know, they're not all in Maryland. They're over in Delaware.
I understand that.
But it supports the industry in Maryland on Eastern Shore with the feed that's made. And a lot of the soybeans, especially in Talbot County, they seem like lately they've been coming across the break to the port, being marketed overseas. Because there's additional price benefit for that for us. And we deliver a lot of the soybeans locally to Mount Air Farms, which has got a location in Y Mills, Maryland. That most of those soybeans are put in containers and they're brought across the bridge and to the port of Baltimore to be marketed overseas. But no, not all the grain stays in Maryland, no.
And I understand that. I guess the question I'm trying to get to is that you talked about more profitability, and I'm just trying to get an idea from you. What does that look like when you say more profitability? Is it an increase in prices? Is it a broader market? What does that look like when you say more profitability?
Definitely an increase in prices. I mean, we just came off a very dry year. We had probably 50% yield loss this year, corn and soybeans across the board, from lack of rainfall at the right time. Yet, I mean, we had rain for the year. If you look at the rainfall totals for the whole year, we were not that far off normal. But during the time that it mattered, we were severely limited with moisture. And
which is not something you can control. But
it's out of our
control. What does profitability look like?
That we made money.
For your industry,
that we didn't lose $100 an acre or $200 an acre every year. The deer figure costing me close to $100 an acre per year. And I've given up farms as well because it just doesn't make sense. You can only stand so much, and at some point, you just got to say enough is enough. And the deer are key to profitability, very much so. In Talbot County, in Dorchester County, and every county on the shore, every state in the state, but definitely on the shore, deer are a huge effect on profit, have a very huge effect on profitability. Huge effect. I mean, plant soybeans, never harvest the acre of the crop in a field, because the deer have ate the whole field, whole farm. And when you do that 2 or 3 times in a row, you never go back to the farm to harvest it, it's time to give up the ground and not somebody else farm it.
Anyone else?
So to speak a little bit different, Madam Vice, I spoke about value-added agriculture and what that looks like. Value add has really become a differentiator in allowing the younger generation or even the older generation that maybe worked off the farm and now have inherited it, and they want to come home and they want to get involved again. And there's a lot of different ways. It's raising a crop that you know you're going to turn into something else. It's milking goats and making soap and lotions and everything else in between. There are regulations that cross-cut multiple government agencies, and frankly, it can be a maze to figure out how to get through and how to make something happen and to how to get it approved or get it labeled so that it can be sold for human consumption. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. As more and more people get involved, we learn the tricks and the trades and how to get through and what's the, step A, step B, skip C, go to D, then jump back to C, and then maybe you go to Schedule F to get where you need to. So a clear-cut framework. A few years ago, we legislated for an ombudsman for value add housed in under the Secretary of Agriculture. That has been huge for the state of Maryland and for Maryland agriculture. And if we get them a little bit of funding, I think we can make it even a little bit better. I know that's hard to ask for in this current economic situation, but got to do what you got to do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you to the five of you, not only for sharing your sort of affiliations viewpoints, but also your personal experiences. Much appreciated. Colleagues, our hearing, will not start till 2 o'clock. So go check that email, return that phone call, fill that coffee cup, and be back in your seat at 2 o'clock. Thank you all.
Thank you.